year was 1940. Eight teenagers stood by in disbelief. Nazi Germany had invaded their country, and no one was standing against them. It only took 8 teenagers to start a countrywide resistance against tyranny. A resistance that ended up with Germany losing all control and rights in Denmark. In April 1940, World War II was in full swing, and the German army was exploding across Europe. As they began their invasion of Denmark, Knud Pedersen, a young teenager living in the Danish city of Aalborg, was appalled that his country had surrendered to the Nazis, and decided to revolt in any way he could. He and his newly formed club, the Churchill Club, took a stand and fought for Denmark's freedom by performing random acts of sabotage against the Nazi army. Knud Pedersen, only 16 years old at the time, took a stand in the history of his country and fueled Denmark's rebellion against the Nazi tyranny, showing us how teenagers can take a big role in shaping the future of their country. At the end of World War I, Hitler formed the Nazi Party based on his belief that the Aryan race was superior and that the Jewish race were destroyers of the world. He tried to take over the German government several times, and after he finally succeeded, attacked Poland because he believed that they were persecuting Germans. His ultimate goal was to conquer all of Europe and kill every last Jew, because he believed that they were to blame for destroying the Aryan race in Germany. In 1940, Norway had a major export of iron ore, and Hitler wanted this resource to help build weapons and vehicles for his new Nazi army. In order to use this resource, Hitler needed to transport it through Denmark, so he decided to first conquer Denmark before setting his eyes on Norway. As Philip Hoos outlines in his book, The Boys Who Challenged Hitler, the German invasion of Denmark occurred on April 9, 1940. A Danish ship that normally carried coal acted like the Trojan horse of Greek mythology. As it sailed into the Copenhagen port, it secretly housed members of the German army, who attacked and took over the harbor. Further away, planes flew over the Aalborg airport and dropped paratroopers, who took over Denmark's largest airport. Denmark's Prime Minister and King Christian X, called for a quick surrender to avoid the disasters of war. By signing the agreement, they allowed Germans to occupy their country and take over their government. While this agreement saved many lives, it ended up costing them their country's independence. In 1940, when the Germans invaded Denmark, there was a teen in 8th grade living in Odense by the name of Knud Pedersen. He was appalled that Denmark had given their country over to German occupation without fighting at all. During an interview in the year 2000, Mr. Pedersen told the following story: "Jens and I and our closest friends were totally ashamed of our government. At least the Norwegian victim had gone down in a country they could be proud of." After listening to the radio about the skirmishes of the British Royal Air Force, Knud and his brother and their friends began a club that mimicked their heroes and called it the RAF Club. As a club, they performed typical teenager pranks in opposing the Germans. They would ride their bikes through checkpoints to show their defiance, and they would cut telephone lines to the German barracks. In 1941, Knud and his family moved to the large city of Aalborg. Now that Knud and his brother were apart from their friends, they had decided to form a new club and were willing to take bigger risks than they had with the RAF. They were big fans of Winston Churchill and were sad that Mr. Churchill had called their country Hitler's pet canary. The boys knew that Churchill was trying to humble the Denmark people and start a revolution, and the boys took up the challenge. They called their new club the Churchill Club. Knud and Jens, along with 6 of their friends, began plans to sabotage the Germans so that they could return to their normal life before German occupation. At first, their defiance consisted of small acts, such as painting the slogan, "War Profiteer," on the windows of German sympathizers. But soon, it became clear that they wanted to raise the bar of their rebellion. For over a year, their acts became bolder and bolder, and consisted of the destruction of German vehicles and stealing German weapons. The Churchill Club quickly became well known and piqued the interest of the German Secret Service. After a whole week of hiding from the German police, they were eventually found and put in prison. At the time of their imprisonment, the boys were only 16 and 17 years old. Initially, the boys were sent to a local prison in Aalborg, but they managed to escape. Unfortunately for them, they escaped during the city's bombing drill, so that no one else was on the streets. They were quickly arrested for a second time. This time, they were split apart and sent to different prisons in Germany. Knud ended up in a prison for those who revolted against German ideals. Here, he was treated very poorly and ended up in solitary confinement for most of his 3-year-long stay. After 3 years, Knud was released on parole and went home to find that Denmark people were revolting all over the country. The boys from the Churchill Club had spurred a new rebellion because they had decided to stand up for the rights of their country. Shortly after Knud was released in 1945, the war ended and he was allowed to go to college where he studied art. Today, there is a museum in Denmark dedicated to his artwork. He later found out that a few members of the Churchill Club had died in prison, and he had lost contact with all but his brother Jens. Jens also went to college and became an engineer. The actions of the Churchill Club had reaching effects. At first, they proved to be a distraction to the German army, but quickly became an economic distraction as the boys stole and broke much of their expensive machinery. However, even more important were the long-lasting effects of the rebellion. The actions of the Churchill Club encouraged a nation to rebel against the Nazi tyranny. Spearheaded by the Churchill Club, Denmark's rebellion helped end the German occupation in their country, and helped stop the export of iron ore from Norway. The actions of Knud Pedersen, his brother Jens, and their friends spurred a nation to stand up for themselves. Stemming from the rebellion, Denmark stood up and fought against the German occupation and eventually won back their freedom. It only took 8 teenagers with visions of freedom to unite a nation. 8 teenagers to challenge and inspire all those who fought against the Nazi regime. Only 8 teens. What can you do?